everyone, Not Dead Yet here, and today I want to talk about the importance of genetics in boxing. AlphaDestiny and Greg Doucette have recently had a bit of a back and forth talking about the importance of genetics in things like building strength and building a physique, and then EnkiriEliteFitness put out a video that I watched that I had some interesting points and I found rather interesting, and it inspired me to throw my hat into the ring in regards to this topic, because genetics in boxing has been something I've wanted to talk about for a while, especially with the community surrounding Greg Doucette and the message that he preaches about it being nigh impossible to achieve elite status unless you have elite genetics. And I disagree with that completely. Now, before you get all labeling me as a hater or something like that, I think that it's important to make a distinction that I am talking strictly through the lens of boxing. Greg Doucette and AlphaDestiny and EnkiriEliteFitness, all those people are talking about things like building strength, building a physique, bodybuilding. Those things, I truly do believe that genetics play a larger role in than something like boxing, or really any combat sports for that matter. Because obviously, like, if you don't have the genetics for it, you're not going to win an IFBB Pro card. You know, if I stand at 5'7", and I highly doubt I will ever compete in the sport of strongman. However, let's talk about my height, 5'7". I believe boxing is one of the only sports, well, combat sports. I'll say combat sports as a general term, but I'm going to talk specifically about boxing. Combat sports is one of the only sports ever where being short is not an inherent disadvantage. It's why I don't really like it when people talk about the whole, he's got the height advantage. It's not really a height advantage. Your height just changes how you fight. And that is the same with your genetics. Now, listen, don't get pedantic on me. Let's not start splitting hairs here. As somebody with severe MS or who is missing their arms or a leg most likely is not going to become world boxing champion. Stephen Hawking, before he died, was not going to become champ of the world. However, most people with average genetics and even poor genetics can rise to the top and become elite in the sport of boxing. It just changes how you fight. You have a glass jaw, you lean back and pick a fighting style that protects your chin. You can't take a body shot, have a fighting style where your elbows are in and you protect your body. You're short, have an aggressive style that lets you get in and close the distance. You're tall, use your long reach, use the jab. Fighting is all about maximizing your strengths, playing to your strengths, and minimizing your weaknesses, and the person who does that best is going to win the fight. Now, here's the thing. Do great genetics help? Yes. Mike Tyson not really having a neck, or Roy Jones Jr. having longer arms than he really should for his frame, definitely help when it comes to getting to the top and staying there. Someone with poor genetics may have a harder time getting to the top and may have a harder time staying on top than somebody who has amazing genetics. However, it is not impossible. Let's talk about brittle hands. What are brittle hands? It's a condition where your bones chip and break easier, and as such, you break your hands a lot more easily. You know who has brittle hands? Floyd Mayweather. One of the greatest boxers of our generation with an undefeated record of 50-0 has brittle hands. Not the best thing for a boxer, eh? And yet, he is still one of the greats. Undefeated, I might add. And actually, if you look at Floyd Mayweather throughout his entire career, you'll actually notice that his fighting style changes when the brittle hands start to affect him. When he was still Pretty Boy Floyd, he was a lot more aggressive. But once the brittle hands started to take effect, kind of when he turned into Money Mayweather, he started to take a lot more of the laid-back, kind of defensive counter-punching style that we know him for now, as opposed to the more aggressive counter-punching style that he had in his younger days. So that's what I always preach when it comes to boxing, because I see a lot of people use genetics as an excuse, and I know Greg doesn't let that happen. He says, don't use the fact that you have poor genetics as an excuse, be the best you that you can be. But from the world of boxing, because remember, I have immersed myself in a world that Greg doesn't know, much like Greg has immersed himself in a world that I don't know. I have very little knowledge of the sport of bodybuilding, and I assume, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but based off of his videos, he said it before, he doesn't really like getting punched in the face. Boxing is not a world that he is familiar with. I have been boxing for over a decade and a half, and I've been coaching boxing for a decade. And I have seen the genetic anomalies, both good and bad. I have seen people who are, it's like, oh my god, you have the most amazing genetics possible, and I have seen people where it's like, how the hell are you still alive right now? And yet, I've had a guy who had the genetics of, how are you alive? Step into the ring. Sure, he didn't become world champ, but he didn't want to. But he still stepped into the ring and fought, and that in itself is an amazing accomplishment. And who's to say he couldn't have, if he had kept with it? If you want more details on that story, I have a video on it. I'll have it linked in the cards wherever. Go watch it. Good video. But my overall point is, even me, because I use myself as an example, because I don't think, I am one of the best fighters in this country, and a lot of people look at me like I am some sort of freak. I've talked about my mentality when it comes to things, getting through tough times. I did this, I did that, and everyone was always quick to remind me, Eli, I'm not you. And my response is always, yes, but you could be. And people look at me, and again, like, it's hard for me to talk about this philosophy because everyone brushes me off as some anomaly, but I don't think that I am. They'll say like, oh, you were fighting people who were 25 years old, built like Greg at 10 years old. And I'm like, yeah, I was, but I don't think that's really more my genetics. It was more my work ethic. And I know people are going to be like, oh, you're attributing your great genetics to work ethic. I don't think my genetics are all that great. If you've seen me try to catch a football, you will know that I look like one of the most uncoordinated people ever. In fact, my friend Brian, who you've seen in other videos, he's got amazing genetics. He can eat pretty much whatever he wants and still look amazing. He'll have the broad shoulders, big arms, six-pack, that like V-taper with his body. And I can't do that. I can overeat healthy shit and it bloats me and I don't have a good physique. My genetics, I believe, are average or slightly above average. They are, you get what you put in. So if I work hard, train hard, eat right, my body, my performance, my physique will reflect that. But if I don't, it will also reflect that. So yes, that's way better than people who don't get what they put in. But on terms of overall genetics, I'd say 5 or 6 out of 10 personally. And my friend Brian and I have had this conversation because he said to me, it's funny. He's like, you are a national boxing champion. You clearly have hand-eye coordination. You clearly know what you're doing. And yet you catch a football like you don't know how to walk. Like, he says I look like I'm stumbling all over the place and I trip over myself. And to be fair, I am, and I do. And so I'm not sure at this point if I have achieved greatness because of my genetics or because of the fact that I've been doing it literally my entire life. I have been doing it for over 3/4 of my life at this point. And I don't know what to attribute my success to. The answer is probably a bit of both. I have average genetics and an above average work ethic. And again, people would say, oh, well then your work ethic or your mentality is genetics. You have amazing genetics for being mentally tough. And I'd say, no, I wasn't. In fact, I was a little bitch when I was a kid. But through years of pain and suffering, I built myself up to that. I started out small, like anything. I started out with little things and just started stealing my mind to the point now where I consider myself a really tough motherfucker, right? So, I want to kind of just bring in the perspective of somebody who isn't really concerned about too much physique or performance no. I kind of want to bring in a different perspective because I hear so much, especially ever since I joined this whole YouTube fitness community, the importance of elite genetics. And while I do think genetics play a factor, I don't think they play as important a factor as most people think. I think that, especially at least in the realm of combat sports, the average Joe can rise above who they are and become elite. If you have shit genetics, is it going to be harder for you? Yeah. May your reign not be quite as long? Yeah, maybe. But who's to say? Remember, Floyd Mayweather. Another example for me in the UFC is Forrest Griffin. Forrest Griffin is one of my favorite UFC fighters because to me, he represents the ultimate people's champion. He strikes me as just an average dude who loved fighting, and he went in and he became champ for a while. Yeah, sure, he wasn't champ for super long time, but he still did it. He's not this genetic freak. He's no George St. Pierre, Khabib Nurmagomedov, Conor McGregor. These people who just seem unstoppable. Even someone like in the female division, Amanda Nunes, who just seem unstoppable. And yet he stood against titans, gods among men, and for a while stood toe-to-toe with them. And that is what boxing and combat sports is to me. Average people achieving greatness. Despite poor genetics, they play to their strengths. Because, again, in the sport of boxing, very rarely, because there's so much that goes into boxing that you just have bad genetics. Like, sure, in bodybuilding, you can say, yeah, you have bad genetics for building muscle, but there's no real bad genetics for boxing. There's such a mix of genetics possible that, again, if you have maybe you have a glass jaw but hands of stone. Maybe you have a weak punch, but you can take a punch like a mother effer. Yes, I am the type of person that will say fuck and then censor fuck in the exact same video. But anyway, and there's always counters to that. Let's say you have soft hands, like your punches don't hurt. Learn to counter. Use your opponent's momentum and strength against them. Let's say you have a glass jaw, like I said. Have really good head movement and a style that emphasizes keeping your head away from punches and protecting your chin. I don't think there's really such thing as bad genetics if we don't split hairs here for boxing. And I don't think genetics are quite as important as they make them out, as people make them out to be, especially in this community here. Because, again, don't split hairs with me, because, again, a guy with no arms most likely won't become boxing champion. However, if you only have one, you might have a shot at kickboxing. But those are just my thoughts. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Greg, if you're watching this, I'd love to hear what you think. I'd love to have a back and forth with you about genetics, because I believe you and I agree on a lot of things. Again, when you speak in the realm of bodybuilding or obtaining a certain physique, even in certain performances, again, it's why I like boxing, because running, for example, I'm 5'7". My friend who's 6'2", he can outpace me, and I run way more than him. It's just the simple fact that his stride is 2 times mine. And so boxing to me was the one sport where my height was not an inherent disadvantage. Badminton, basketball, hell, even soccer, because again, the running aspect, I was always at a disadvantage, and sure, I could keep up, but I was never able to obtain that elite status. And so boxing to me, and I is the one sport where you can counter your weaknesses, rise above your weaknesses, and that including poor genetics, and become elite, become great. But those are just my thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comment section below, and until next time, I'm not dead yet, and if you aren't either, there's always a tomorrow waiting for you.